gavel. Put it right down.
I call this meeting to order. Please rise for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for invocation. Father Roebling, are you here? All right. Is it Robling or Roebling? Robling. Thank you for coming tonight. Father Dan Robling is from the Anglican Church of Atonement. Welcome.
Let us pray. Dear God, thank you for the privilege to come before you. In petition and speaking words of love. We thank you for this community, for all the loving, serving, caring people, for our leaders. We ask, dear God, that you would bless those of our community who are suffering in these trying times. The loss of jobs and income, homes, those of us who are sorrowful in any way. And dear God, we thank you for these leaders of our community who give of their time and energy and talents to serve and lead us. We ask that you would guide them, that they may do what is best. All this we ask in the name of your Son, our Savior. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Roll call, Beth.
Mayor Schlum?
Here.
Councilmember Dickey? Here. Vice Mayor Archambault?
Here.
Councilmember Cantino?
Here.
Councilmember Hanson? Here. Councilmember Leger?
Here. Thank you very much. Public, please note, item number 2 on the consent agenda has been removed at the request of staff. Item 2 on the consent agenda is removed. We've got a couple of presentations. We're going to start out with a presentation relating to the pursuit of stimulus funds for our fine community. Mr. Davis, tell us about stimulus, how we're doing.
Well, thank you, Mayor. It's probably been well publicized. The town, along with other communities throughout the country, have been engaged in qualifying for funds that are made possible through the ARRA, the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. And as part of that, we have enlisted the help of several volunteers to help us identify possibilities. The efforts of the town have been focused primarily in the areas of transportation, public safety, environmental, as well as we've been trying to give some support also to, or lend our support to the school district, the sanitary district as well. We've also looked at possible grants and funding for economic development. With us today we have Katie Decker, our Community Affairs Administrator, as well as Raymond Reese, our Environmental Planner. And I think that's the only two that are going to be.
Randy.
And then, and then we have Randy Roberts, our Deputy Chief, to talk about possible FEMA funding of a fire station. Sorry, Randy, you were behind Katie. There you are. But we're going to turn it over to Katie, and she'll start it off by talking about transportation.
Thank you. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think Rick just covered my first 2 slides, actually, so this presentation may go a little faster than we thought. Avenues for obtaining funds. As Rick mentioned, there's a number of different avenues that we have that we can pursue funds through, primarily through the county, through the state, and through the federal government. Some of those overlap a bit depending on the area, as you'll see, especially in transportation. The 3 areas that we have really focused on after mining through pages and pages and pages of paper that we have found are applicable to Fountain Hills are transportation, the environment, and public safety. And this is where we think that there's legitimate opportunity to either pursue or have pursued funds and look forward to doing more in the future. For instance, under transportation, the state and county is one of these hybrid examples that I referenced earlier. The town has received $1.1 million already, which is going to be used for SHEA per council's direction, which is very encouraging. The hard part about this was money that was assigned through ADOT, but the formula was created by MEG. It was done with a $500,000 base, and then population was added to that. So that's how we get to the $1.1 million. But we also are looking to the federal government to say, are there other opportunities to do more things along SHEA? In fact, there's something called Title 12 funding, and the parameters for that are going to be coming out May 18th. And we're looking at additional funds possibly coming down that way as well. So we haven't given up on transportation yet. We could easily be content with $1.1 million, but we want to go ahead and see what else is available for us out there. In regards to the environment, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Raymond Reese, our environmental planner, as he has been pursuing these funds.
Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you, Katie. We have been searching for those elusive funds relating to the energy through the stimulus funds. And I had the opportunity to attend a meeting just yesterday with about 40 other communities, 10 counties. There were over 300 folks who attended this meeting. It was put on by SRP and a number of other folks. Through the county, there actually are no funds that are going to be dispersed to any municipalities through the county. Most of the stimulus money is going to be done through the state, and that will go through the Commerce Department, through the Energy Department. The DOE Community Energy Program has about $5.7 million that are earmarked for municipalities that are under 35,000. Those have to be distributed to those folks only. I have a little bit more information on that. The application that we would do for these funds is a single application process. That means all of the projects that we would like to work with on this through these monies, we do one application, and the administrative cost along with energy audits can be all rolled into that one application. So if we've got 4 projects we want to work on, we don't have to do all these separate applications. Federal money, there is a federal package that is going to be coming out. The time frame has not been released yet for those. There's $456 million in energy grants. Again, these are available to small cities, towns, and counties under 35,000. That is through the U.S. Department of Energy. And there is a limit to each one of those projects. Those have to be individually applied for. $300,000 limit per projects, but there's no limit on the projects that we could apply for. Now, there is one thing that if there is a neighboring community that you want to partner with and do a project with, there's an additional $50,000 onto that you can apply for. There also, if the neighboring community is applying for the same project and you're doing that, if I'm not mistaken, that's for both entities get that $350,000. The DOE will be awarding those projects from the lowest denominator to the largest denominator, so they're going to try to get that money spread out amongst everybody. But we were ensured that they said there's lots of money there, so we can at least apply for it. And one thing on the $5.7 million, that program will be released July 15th or July 30th, in there sometime. And Randy?
Yeah. Welcome,
Good
Randy.
evening, Mayor and Council. With regard to the federal grants, there's two programs that we are primarily focusing on. The first one we want to talk about a little bit is the Assistance to Firefighter Grants. And that program will ultimately provide about $510 million to fire departments nationwide. The award program, the whole purpose is to enhance response capabilities and protect health and safety of the public with respect to fire and other hazards. And these grants are specifically targeted at training and conducting first responder health and safety programs and buying equipment and also response vehicles. We've been successful with this program already. Chief LaGreca was able to get $40,000 recently to buy some mobile radios, if you'll recall, so we've already had some success, and we're applying in the near future for an upgraded generator for Station 1, also through this Assistance to Firefighter Grants. Now, a separate program, another one that's very interesting to us, is also part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, also known as stimulus money. And this program has provided FEMA with $210 million in grant funds specifically for fire station construction and upgrades. And unfortunately, this is a new program. There's not a whole lot of details to go on, and there's not a lot of history to go on. So we're paying close attention to what's going on, and we're on email lists and everything, and so as soon as we have some more information on that, we'll keep you informed with that as well. FEMA has been working with a lot of stakeholders over the last 6 weeks to solicit a lot of input on how the program should work, and they have developed some draft guidelines, and that's currently going through leadership review. FEMA plans on announcing guidance package in possibly as early as late May, which is a correction from the slide. But this is a competitive process, and we're not even sure what the parameters are yet. But we're just trying to keep our ear to the ground and trying to find out what they're looking for. And these dates tend to change quite a bit, but the grants are expected to be awarded sometime September through December of 2009. Do you have any questions for me?
Might have some at the end.
Okay,
Thank you, Randy.
We also just wanted to take the time to thank our volunteers. We were fortunate enough to have 5 people step forward who picked key areas when we called upon them they're basically subject matter experts in, and mined through the mountains and mountains and mountains of paperwork. So even though they're not here presenting to you, they are the people who have done the lion's share of the work and going through and saying this would fit Fountain Hills, this would not fit Fountain Hills, and finding new things even as they come up. And we would just like to recognize them. Taking care of the environment section is Brian Baker. Economic development had Mike Tyler working on it. Larry Moist stepped forward to work on public safety. Bob Thompson helped with our school district, and Jerry Butler graciously supported us in the area of transportation. And so we just wanted to thank all of them.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thanks volunteers and staff for working to get our piece of the stimulus. Questions for staff? Councilman Dickey?
Thank you, Mayor. This is actually for Raymond, because the transportation one, we have the projects, and then Randy mentioned the generator and, of course, the fire station. What, with energy, do we have anything, does it have to be shovel-ready like everybody's talking, and do we have anything in mind yet?
Councilman Dickey, they don't have to be shovel-ready right now. They have to be able to be completed, I believe, within 3 years of when the application is put in. There are things that we will be able to work on. We could do retrofitting on vehicles. We could do lighting upgrades on public buildings. There's a number of projects, solar projects that we could work on. We just need to get those rolling and get the application in for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just wanted to, again, thank volunteers in particular for sharing their knowledge and hard work and uncovering things and keeping track of what trickles out of Washington. I'm not sure what percentage of stimulus is even out in the street to be bid on or to be considered yet, but I know much of it is yet awaiting guidelines from agencies. Katie, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we mentioned Dr. C.T. Wright. He's also stepped up to help with the school program as well.
That's right. Thank you. But much of the guidelines are not even out of the agencies yet to disseminate stimulus to people to apply for. So this is going to be a long process, of which I'm confident we'll be successful in getting dollars that we are in need of for projects that we will be proud to spend those dollars on. We will make good use of those dollars. That's our commitment here in town, because these are all our dollars. The federal, even though they're coming from the feds, they're our dollars, so we will be conscientious of how they're spent. The stimulus is the law. It was agreed to and signed off on. The dollars are going out the door, and of course much is out of the control of the states and the cities as to how the stimulus is written, where the monies are going to be going, but we are tracking them as best as we can. We take these dollars very seriously, and as the public had commented when we first were addressing the initial amount of monies coming in here at our town council meeting, they asked to make sure we're aware of any strings that are attached. So we are certainly going to be conscientious of that. And initially we got together through some valuable thoughts of others from our community, volunteers, to make sure we engaged the sanitary district and the school district in discussions and information sharing, since we're all small communities, so that we can take care of one another and share information. So we'll continue to do that through our volunteers and staff. So thanks for the update. We hope to see that you're going to bringing in dollars to our community at our next presentation. All right, next item, we're going to go now to Mr. Al Macias, talk to us about our 2010 census and the process. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for the opportunity. I promise to be brief and hopefully a little entertaining if I can be as well.
Good.
I'm going to get. I've got a little PowerPoint here. You have packets on your desk, and I know you're all anxious to start opening those packets and see what's in them. Briefly, the census is required by the Constitution. First one was done in 1790 by U.S. Marshals on horseback. Everyone was counted, and that's the same effort that they're going to make next year. Everyone is counted. There may be some questions about citizenship status. The Constitution says everyone who is residing, living in the country. That's all. That's all we ask. So every year it occurs, every 10 years I should say it occurs. $300 billion, as you were just talking about, in federal grants go out every year, and it's dependent many of those programs are dependent on the numbers that are generated by the census. The first page, when you do open up that your little folder there, is going to list on the left side some of the many programs that are dependent on that. The census is devoting more resources to Arizona in this go-around than any other state in the 10-state region that is covered by Denver. There are 12 regions around the country. The Denver region covers the Rocky Mountain states, the Dakotas, and Nebraska. And part of it is because Arizona has the most population of any state in that region. In addition, we have the largest metropolitan area in the Phoenix area, and unfortunately Arizona underperformed the national average in 2000. And the national average was 67% of the people who got their questionnaires returned them in the mail. Arizona was 63%, Fountain Hills was 69%. So you guys were above average, but it doesn't mean there's not room for improvement, and that's what we're always hoping for. As well, along with, I mentioned resources, we have 14 partnership specialists in Arizona. I'm one of them, focusing primarily on local governments. We also have 3 Hispanic partnership specialists focusing on the Hispanic community, the Spanish language community. We also have an Asian American, African American. Those are all just here in Maricopa County. We have 2 more down in southern Arizona. We have another one in northern Arizona. We also have 3 for the Native American community. One is designated strictly just for the Navajo Nation. So we're throwing a lot of resources. We're also going to bring in some assistants, some part-timers. So we hope to be able to meet your needs, your requests. I guess the first thing I'll tell you is we're a resource, and that's what we aim to be. We're not telling you how to do things. We've got suggestions, but you know your community better than we do, and so whatever we can do to help you get the message out. And with that, I will head down the road here to the census. As I said, this census is going to count everyone. In years past, there was what they called samplings. There's no sampling. By law, this is intended to count all 300, well, as of today, it was 328 million people in the country. My guess is it'll probably be a little bit higher by the time April 1st rolls around. As I said, all U.S. residents are counted, people of all races, ethnic groups, both citizens and non-citizens. The U.S. Constitution requires it, and it is, next year's Census Day is April 1. Somebody's going to say something about April Fools. I have nothing to do with it, but let's get off the table. But the other thing is, you are going to get, you have samples of the questionnaire. If you look at it, it's an old sample. It was a test. Don't get upset because it says May 1st, 2008. But that's just a sample so you have an idea what it's going to look like. This time, the census questionnaire is 10 questions only. None of the long questionnaires that everybody dreaded with how many questions about how many facilities you had in your house and other things like that. It's pretty simple, 10 questions. It will take 10 minutes. That's part of our pitch. It's quick, it's safe, it's confidential. I've taken a lifetime oath, even if I go work, well, I'm sure I'll go work somewhere else in some time in the few years. I can never release any of that information that I might acquire, and I don't have access to any of it, but every census employee takes that lifetime oath. It is confidential, it is private, it even overrides the Patriot Act. I can give you a quick little story. In 1950 or 51, I believe, the White House was being remodeled, and the Secret Service was moving President Truman to the Blair House. They went to the Census Bureau and wanted to get profiles of the people living in that area so they could do a background check on them. The Census Bureau said no, and it was upheld by courts. So that information stays private and confidential. Matter of fact, it stays there for 72 years. So the results of the 1930 census were just released 7 years ago, if you want to go find out what happened in 1930. There are, as I say, hundreds of regionally based partnership specialists all around the country. You're most concerned with what is happening in Arizona. So, as I said, there's 14 of us in the Maricopa County area. The questionnaires will be delivered in March of next year, but before that, there will be a little postcard that will tell you, here come the questionnaires. Pay attention to them. And then there will be another reminder. So you're going to get 2 reminders, and then in the month of April, we want people to respond to those questionnaires. Since you were all talking about dollars, here's one that, a dollar figure you can kind of chew on. National response rate was 67% in 2000. To track down for every 1% nationally, that they had to go back, and when nobody responds, they go knock on your door. Census workers, and that's the old idea of people knocking on your door. For every 1% that it takes to collect that information, it costs $90 million. So if you do some simple math, you're talking about $3 billion to collect that other 33%. So it behooves everyone to get those questionnaires in. The information's more accurate, and it saves a lot of money that may be diverted to our communities. As I said, it's easy. Shortest census and record, 10 questions. It won't take you any more than 10 minutes. It is safe by law. That information is confidential. It is important, as I said, those programs that are listed in there, some of those programs. In addition, obviously, congressional and legislative reapportionment occurs based on the census numbers, and the speculation is that Arizona could pick up another couple of seats in the next census based on those numbers. So it's important. Some of these key dates have already kind of passed a little bit. As I said, 1 year out, well, it was a month ago. We won't worry about that. Verifying the census address list. Some of you may have heard the Census Bureau sent notes out to all the communities that there would be census workers with little GPS handheld devices, a little larger than this clicker, checking addresses, because the questionnaire goes to an address. It doesn't go to an individual, it goes to an address. That was just completed day before yesterday in Maricopa County, 1 month ahead of schedule. And so that process is done so that now they're compiling all that information so the questionnaires will be going out. As I said, Census Day next year, final counts are delivered to the President December 31st of 2010, and then the redistricting counts go and the information to the local communities in March of 2011. January 1, there will be a kickoff of a national media campaign, $200 million, letting everybody know that here comes the census. And that's, as I say, it'll be old media, new media, tweeters, no, let's not have any tweeters, tweeting on Twitter, I should say, as well as, Facebook, everything we can do to reach the different communities. It will be in many languages. As a matter of fact, going back to the questionnaire, it'll be in 6 languages next year: English, Spanish, Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Russian. In addition, the there will be questionnaire assistance provided in 59 different languages, so people can call and get that information. Going back to the dates here, questionnaires are mailed, the reminders, the postcards. April 1st is Census Day. The month of April, we want everybody to send their census questionnaires back. In March and June, there will be group quarters in transitory locations, homeless shelters, dormitories. Those types of quarters are counted. As well, there's also another strategy for military bases. There's also another process for counting the jails and the prisons. And so all that will be taking place next year as well. The Quality Assistance Centers, we call them QACs, are staffed usually located in partner space. Let's say a library or a community organization has an office. They would provide space for people who have questions, and maybe they don't feel comfortable asking it. There will be staff there, either Census Bureau staff or that community organization might be able to provide staff. They'd be trained, and then the idea is that these will be open, in many cases will be churches, so they're not going to be just open up Monday through Friday 8 to 5. So you would have a church, let's say, has a service on Sunday, and then for 2 or 3 hours afterwards, perhaps their church members could come in and get their questions answered. And so that's what a questionnaire assistance center is, and that will provide, as I say, help to people who have some language needs or just general questions. There's 1,800 of these across the Denver region. Be Counted sites. This is another way to cover those people who for some reason might not get a questionnaire. There will be another, it's like a kiosk. Western Union, for example, is one of our national partners. At all their sites, they'll have a little kiosk with the questionnaire there. It'll be a little different from the one you get in the mail, but it will still cover the basic information. And the idea is to reach everyone. We don't want to overlook anyone. As I said, questionnaire assistance, bilingual, 6 different languages, and so we're going to reach out in every way we can. Partnership program. This might get your attention because this is money, small amounts of money that are called micro purchases that partners can have access to. So, for example, if you have Fountain Hills Days at Chase Field in about a month, I think. Okay, let's say you had a group, an event like that, and you wanted to buy a bunch of T-shirts for everybody that was going there to make sure that Fountain Hills is, supporting the census. You could have the Fountain Hills logo on the front and the census message on the back. Up to $2,999, the Census Bureau will pick up that cost. You don't have to go through any federal procurement rules. You use your usual vendors. And so that would be an opportunity. That's what we're doing with partners. The whole idea is getting the messages out. I'm working with the Maricopa County Animal Care and Control. They do something in what they call their underserved communities, those areas where people aren't getting their dogs licensed. We're going to work with them. They may have a chew toy that goes in and says, thanks for getting your dog licensed and vaccinated. And on the other side, they'll say, make sure you're counted too. You can be creative. And so that's an opportunity there. There's also marketing materials. I know I've mentioned some of this to Katie and some other stuff so that you folks can download. Put on your own website. Put a link. Fountain Hills supports that. It's quick. It's safe. It's important. That's the basic message. In the packet here, on the left side, as I said, the first page is listed all the different programs. And then what I did was I included one of the flyers that we are using for the many different groups. We're using touching business, community-based, faith-based, education. And so that's that information there. As we move on the right side, there is the census. And then I also included a printout of all the questionnaire response rate for all the cities in Maricopa County. And so you can see where Fountain Hills scored. As I said, 69%. Good score. Well, we'll give that a low C. We could maybe raise it to a... And then there's a complete count committee. And this is where we are asking you to reach out to the community leaders, the key people in your community to come together and help us get that message out. And this will provide you a guide. And then, as I said earlier on, I'm a resource. I can come in and provide training or just answer questions for you. There's also some key dates. And the last form on the right side is the partnership form. And as I said, that would provide you access to those micro purchases. And for example, the city, we're not limited here just to the city. The city could sign a partnership form, the Parks Department could sign a partnership form, the library could sign a partnership form. So each one of those would have access to those amounts of money. And the application forms, I was telling Katie, should be online and should be available any day now. And so that money you can start applying for it ASAP, probably within the next week or so. Kind of blown through everything. I don't know if, any questions? Anything I can ask?
Looks like just the last time we touched on the micro
Micro-purchase?
purchase is
Yeah.
available to governments, community-based organizations, faith-based, schools, media, business, and others. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. That's good information for those organizations that are either here or listening on Channel 11 to help ensure Fountain Hills is counted through this micro-purchase.
Right. And you have to, the one thing is, you have to be a partner. You have to sign on. The partnership will require some things. And as a city, some of the things that I mentioned, putting the messaging on your website, sponsoring an event, those can be done by community organizations, they can be done by businesses, but that's how you have to be a partner to do that. And so
Is the partnership fee $3,000?
there is no fee.
Okay, good. Not a lot.
I don't want to say that it's free money, but it won't cost you anything, other than a little time to fill it out.
Good, and thank you very much for coming out. Mr. Macias, any questions, council? I have a question that's
Sure.
obviously important. Our community's counted for the reasons you mentioned. Things are apportioned out often for a decade by the census.
Right.
The census jobs in Fountain Hills available, are those filled at this point, or when might people that want a part-time job or full-time job look for jobs with the census?
They did an original hiring of a pool, and so that's pretty much, there are 4 more census offices that are going to be opened up in the Phoenix area. Thanks, I overlooked that. There's the one main office downtown in Tempe. In Phoenix. In October, there will be 4 more offices, one in Scottsdale, Mesa, North Phoenix, and Peoria. So they're going to be kind of geographically spread around. They are currently looking for managerial positions at each of those jobs sites. If you go to the main census webpage, www.census.gov, on the left-hand side is a heading that says Jobs with the Census. Click on that and follow the links, and that will take you to the listings of those jobs and how to apply for them. And so those will be open, as I said, the positions are open for another 8 days. May 15th it closes. In addition to that, once those offices are open, there will be probably some more administrative and clerical support staff that will be hired as they get close to the opening date. Those jobs aren't posted. I would only encourage people who are interested to keep going to the census website and checking on that.
How about troops, the troops that are out of country? How are they counted?
There is a separate process that the Census Bureau has for counting them. We're not involved in that, so I don't have the detail, but they're not overlooked, and the communities aren't shorted on that.
And then you mentioned mailings are coming starting next year, but the main mailing is coming in March. Is that what
Yes.
you said? So
Exactly.
the mailing that people would respond to would be in March?
Well, yeah, that's when the questionnaires will go out, and it'll be the last 2 weeks of March. They're going to start shoving them into the pipeline, and, they'll be
That
laying in the
here in Arizona, we have these birds called snowbirds.
I've heard of them, yes.
How does that, our fine winter visitors, how does it affect them being counted?
The questionnaire says where you are living on April 1st. That's what I can tell you, and it is what it says. So it kind of depends, what's happening. If Fountain Hills wants to have a giant event and keep all those migratory visitors here for an extra week, and get them to fill it out, then I guess you could do
I
that.
think we're having a Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois day.
On April 2nd, right?
April 1st, Mountain Park. Okay. Appreciate that's important here in
Right.
Arizona. Councilmember Dickey, question?
Mayor, thank you. That just reminded me, because I saw you had the question on where do you have a part-time residence or if you live elsewhere, but so this doesn't care what your legal residence is?
It says where you are living,
That
yeah.
day.
I don't want to be coy, but that's what I have to tell you, because that's what it says, and that's That's what it's going to be.
All right, thanks.
So, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, you may have your Minnesota or Wisconsin, and it depends on where they feel their loyalty here. You know, if they feel that they need to, you know, stay and that they need, their loyalty is in Madison, Wisconsin, well, then you have to convince them that their loyalty should be to Fountain Hills.
April 1. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Have a good night. All right, next item is presentation by Parks and Recreation Director Mark Mayer, introducing a bronze sculpture titled Quackers, being proposed by the Public Art Committee to be paid for by the 1% Public Art Fund.
I don't think this has ever happened before. We've talked about Quackers twice within a matter of a few seconds here.
You want to repeat that?
Trying to get out. I clicked it already, but it just goes back one slide. I got it. Thanks. Yep. Thank you. Okay, Mayor Slumman, members of the council. If you recall, we started through this process a number of months ago and changed the actual process where we bring things forward. The first time I bring items forward for your consideration is just an introduction, which I'm doing tonight. This particular piece is being recommended by the Public Art Committee. As I indicated in my memo to you, its title is Quackers, and it was done by Colorado artist Michael Dwyer. This particular piece would be located on the site map that I had prepared, and it was attached into your document that shows the approximate location of this particular piece. I should also mention that the Public Art Committee is seeking funds from the 1% Public Art Fund, and as I try to reference each time for the public's benefit, because I know the council is well aware of this, but that these are not public funds. These are coming from the 1% Public Art Fund, which is specifically designed for that purpose, and not tax dollars per se. The reason why these funds became subsequently available is because the Public Art Committee came forward and paid for the cost of Blue Spire subsequent to the last meeting where we approved that particular piece. So there are dollars available within the fund now to fund this. So my intent would be to come back to you, make one final presentation at your next meeting, and ask for consideration for the piece. I would also ask at that same meeting for approval for your consideration of the location of this particular piece. If you recall, in the combined public art document that we put together and presented to you a while back, it had a map of Fountain Park and listed a number of sites where public art could potentially be placed. This particular location is not one of those. The Public Art Committee is seeking an additional location on that map. This one specifically because this is an area of the park that tends to attract a lot of waterfowl that we get here seasonally, and so this particular area seemed to be quite fitting for this particular piece, and so that's why they're seeking this particular location. So unless there are any questions, I would bring this item back to you then for your consideration on the 21st.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Any quacks or tweets? All right.
No Twitters either.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
Next item is presentation by Pat Walker and Andrew Ream of Red Oak Consulting regarding development fee analysis report. Welcome.
Mayor and members of the council, my name is Pat Walker. I'm principal consultant for Red Oak Consulting. I have with me this evening my colleague Andrew Ream, who's senior consultant for Red Oak. We're a division of Malcolm Perney, and what we'll be presenting tonight is the fee study that we completed in conjunction with your staff, Julie Getty, Mary Martin, and all the departments in the town. What I'd like to cover is to just talk about development fees in general, talk about why you have them, a little bit of background on them, the statutes that give us the requirements for developing fees, the actual fee study report, the demographics, assumptions used, and then the actual calculation per fee area, a recommended fee summary, a comparison, and then the schedule for adoption, and then open it up for questions and discussion at the end. Back on April 28th, Julie Getty presented to you the study and filed the official notice of intent. And what does that mean? That is when the clock starts to be able to adopt impact fees. There's a requirement in the state statute that you must give at least 60 days in advance notice of intention to assess, anew, or modify impact or development fees. And then you also have to have something they call an infrastructure improvement plan, that I'll go into more detail on that. Both those things were filed with Julie and available to the public and presented on the web, so they will be available to anyone that would like to have a copy of it. You all have a copy in front of you too that's bound, and that's what we'll be referring to this evening. So what is a development fee? Well, the most simplistic term is a one-time charge against new development designed to reflect proportionate cost to capital facilities to serve new development. What does that mean? Well, a development fee is to only go towards things like capital facilities or infrastructure that are needed as a result of new development or growth. And so you have that one-time charge that you can collect as a town to pay for those sorts of things. So it rose by any other name. There's other names you're going to hear and probably used interchangeably this evening. It can also be called an investment fee, an impact fee, system development charge, capital recovery charge, system expansion fee, or capacity fee. But the thing they all have in common is that, again, they are a fee in order to build capital facilities or infrastructure for new development. So why do you have one? Well, if you don't have a development fee and you grow as a town and you have to build capital facilities and infrastructure, two things can happen if you don't have development fees. One is that you would have to charge everybody that lives here today to build that, and growth would not be paying for the demand it places on the town. The other thing that could happen is if you didn't have the money to do it, then service levels can decline. So that's why you have a development fee. Arizona revised statutes have been in place for a while, but about 2 years ago there were some additional restrictions added in the guidelines and for the methodology, calculation, and implementation. One of the things that's important is that they have to bear a reasonable relationship to the cost of providing the necessary services to development. Now, where that gets a little gray is what is considered necessary. Well, that's why you have different development fees for different communities, because you are unique, you have your own set of service levels and needs and vision, and so necessary may be different for the town of Fountain Hills versus another community. One of the other things the statute requires is that you must segregate the development fee funds on an annual report. It has to be filed by September 30th of every year, and the town of Fountain Hills has met that requirement. And then you have to have a schedule of development fees that are paid when a permit is issued. You have to assess them in a non-discriminatory manner. Well, what does that mean? When you look at a development fee and you calculate it, you can't just arbitrarily decide, you know what, I'm not going to charge multifamily, I'm only going to charge commercial and single family, and then put the burden of what the multifamily should have paid or whatever group on everybody else. So it's got to be in a non-discriminatory manner. The statute also allows for you to adjust the fees annually by nationally recognized index between the development fee updates, so that you don't always have to update the study per se. You can just have an inflationary factor applied to it annually without all the requirements of the public hearings and the 75 days and that sort of thing. Nationally recognized index that we normally recommend is the ENR Engineering News Record, CCI Cost Construction Index for the 20-city average. And then you must have an adopted infrastructure improvement plan, which again 2 years ago was new to the state statute. So what is an IIP? That's what we refer to it as. Well, it needs to be a written plan, and it has to have the public service subject to an investment fee or development fee. It can be the town's capital improvement program. You have a 5-year capital improvement program. That doesn't mean you have to have a 5-year IIP. You can have an IIP all the way to build out, which is what Town of Fountain Hills has. So you use your CIP and then you use your master plans to determine what infrastructure and facilities you need for new growth. You must estimate what you need for public services as a result of future development and how you came up with the cost estimates that you have in the IIP. You have to forecast the cost of infrastructure, the improvements, property financing, and other capital costs. And in our presentation, we have included financing costs because, unfortunately, you don't always have the money in the bank to build the facility or infrastructure right now, so you have to sometimes finance it and pay it back with debt service through impact fees. And then it also must estimate the time required to finance and provide the service. So that's what we're doing. We have done for the April 28th Notice of Intent, provide you the infrastructure improvement plan and the development fee study report. With that, I'll turn it over to Andrew, who will go into the assumptions and the actual fee calculations.
Thank you.
This slide talks about some of the major assumptions that are involved. There are a lot of projections over a multi-year plan, a lot of information, but particularly the major assumptions, the first one are some demographics having to do with square feet. We'll get into a little bit how it relates to the study and the information itself, but it drives some of the allocations between the residential and non-residential classifications. The second set of demographic projections are what types of capacity units are going to be present over time, and these are in the form of dwelling units and square feet for non-residential. With any sort of multi-year financial plan, we've got projections in terms of inflation. As Pat had mentioned, there are projections of bond issues, 20-year term, 5% interest rate, issuance costs, and lastly, along with the recommendation that the fees be indexed annually, in between more in-depth analyses that drive increasing fees over time as the revenues go up as well. Oh, wrong way. So in terms of the fees that were updated, they all exist today. Here's a listing. They're grouped by those that are paid just by residential developments, as well as those that are paid by residential and non-residential. Now, as Pat mentioned, the rational nexus is one of the items that the Arizona Revised Statutes and the legislation speaks to. It really, in layman terms, it correlates the burden that new development puts on the town in terms of new facilities to the calculation of the fee itself. In terms of the methodologies, there's a few different ways of going about that. We're going to cover what the three approaches that we evaluated as part of this study. So the first one is equity buy-in. It's backward looking. It starts with the existing assets and what the replacement value of what the town has built today is, so that when new customers, they're assessed the portion of those assets that are related to the capacity that those assets provide. And it's particularly appropriate when you've got something, say, that is a particular facility that's is sized to meet the build-out population, so that the capacity exists to serve new development. Second approach that we looked at is an incremental. This is forward-looking. Now, we've got some information on the slide. Within the incremental, there's facilities that are purely growth-related. They're just being built because the demands of new residents are placing. There are also facilities that do have a benefit to growth, but they're also benefiting existing residents. They may be replacing an existing facility at the same time that it's being expanded. So we use an approach where we're allocating a % of the projects as it relates to that benefit between growth and non-growth. Lastly, there's the hybrid. The hybrid combines the buy-in and the incremental and looks not only at the assets that are in place today, it looks at the growth-related assets that are required to serve new development and combines the two in terms of calculating the fees. We're going to go through in a little more detail the different fee areas and the calculation that resulted in the proposed fees. But before we do that, there are different approaches. There's really no right or wrong answer. There are different ways to get about or get at the unit cost the new development is placing on the town in terms of new facilities or existing facilities that provide the service level. Secondly, there's pros and cons. There's upsides and downsides of each approach. So this really summarizes, as you can see, the hybrid is the primary methodology that we're recommending in terms of the fees. One exception being in the area of streets, where the forward-looking or incremental is the approach that's being recommended. So before we get into some of the detailed numbers, just wanted to walk you through the calculation itself that relies on two steps.
First step is we want to find out what the capital costs. So as I mentioned, this is the hybrid method. We've got existing asset values. We also have growth-related capital as it benefits new development. We're doing some deductions for grants and donated assets. That gives us the hard infrastructure cost. We also have a financing cost component, as Pat had also mentioned, where the few things are happening. If there's a dedicated funding source with it, which the town does have in terms of outstanding debt, we're deducting that principal. That debt went to fund assets that are in place today, and it's being repaid by taxes, property taxes, excise taxes, or a different funding source. The second components have to do with the net present value of interest, both existing and outstanding, projected debt, when there isn't a dedicated funding source in place. The second step involves, once we get and arrive at the capital costs, we want to segment this between residential and non-residential. I'd mentioned this earlier in the presentation, that it's based on square foot information at build-out. And once we've got it segmented between the two components, we take the dollars and divide it by the capacity units, and that gives us the fee. So the next few slides are going to do exactly that two-step illustration that I talked about, where we've got the first step summarized. We've got capital costs in terms of the general government fee, with all of the previous steps to arrive at that number already done in arriving at that value. The second step is splitting the two. We've got the dollars that are residential, dollars that are non-residential, divided by the capacity units, and the result is the recommended fee of approximately $1,500 per dwelling unit for residential, and a little under $1 per square foot for non-residential. In terms of the next fee area, the law enforcement, very similar step that follows this process, arriving at the fees that you see on this table. As we move into a few of the other areas, we're seeing a little easier or more basic calculation, because this is a fee that's only paid by residential customers. So there isn't the need to split between residential and non-residential. Get the dollars divided by the capacity units. The result is the fee. In terms of park and recreation, this is summarized as well on this slide. We've got a couple other fee areas, fire and emergency services, that are summarized, residential and non-residential paying. As you can see, walks through the same process to arrive at the fees. And lastly, library and museum, which is almost the final fee area. Now I'm going to hand it back to Pat to talk about transportation and a few of the other components.
On the transportation fee, there's a lot of moving parts in this one, and I'm going to try to walk through it with you as quickly as I can, but there's a lot of different sources and information that goes through this. So I'm going to kind of summarize it first, I think. The bottom line is that you have to go to different sources like the Institute of Traffic Engineer, what they call the Trip Generation Manual, and get information. You also have to go to something called the National Household Travel Survey to get information. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, you need to know how many vehicle miles are traveled by a single-family resident, by a commercial business, how many people are coming back and forth, because you have to build your roadway system, arterial streets, to be able to accommodate that so that you don't have congestion, that you have enough roadways to be able to support the growth that comes into the town. So how do we get there? How do we know what that vehicle mile traveled is? Well, the first is the trip ends, vehicle trip ends. You have to determine that. Okay, and that is, again, from the Institute of the Traffic Engineering Manual. And what that is, if you look at it this way, in the most simplistic way, it's just, you know, those rubber traffic counters that you have, you put one at the end of your driveway, and you go over it, that'd be one. You're going to go to the grocery store, let's say there's one at the driveway of the grocery store. You go over 2. You come out of the grocery store, that's 3. You go back to your home, that's 4. Actually, that's not 4 trips. That's only 2 trips because you went to the grocery store and back. So there's an adjustment factor that you apply to that, 50%, okay, and that you want to apply, and I'll get into the numbers in a minute to give you an idea. That's how you come up to the vehicle miles traveled, by taking your number of vehicle trip ends by your trip adjustment factor, and then you look at the length of the trip, and there's an average on that. And again, I'm just going to go through this quickly because I want to get to the actual numbers where it will make more sense. The bottom line is you want to look at what your vehicle miles traveled are for a single family, for commercial. Then you want to look at the cost per vehicle mile traveled that's going to be able to put in the roadway system, whether it be 2-lane or 4-lane, okay? And how do you get to that unit cost? So let's get to the numbers. This is a single-family residential example. The number of vehicle trips by the ITE manual is 9.57. The trip adjustment factor is 50%, so that means that the vehicle trips ends are 4.79. The normal length of the trip for people in Fountain Hills and single family, according to the National Household Travel Survey, is 3.9 miles. You multiply that to get 18.71 vehicle miles traveled per single family dwelling unit. Then you multiply that times the cost per the vehicle mile traveled, and then you get a fee for single-family residential for transportation of $5,614. So how did I get to the $300.02? Well, the capital cost is $29,402,360 to build out for arterial streets for the town to be able to support that capacity that you need. And how is that calculated? Well, it's not only looking at the cost of construction, it's also taking into consideration what they call pass-through traffic, which is where people come outside your city limits and then town limits and then on the other side. So you don't want to count that into your cost and put that on new development. Everybody shares in that cost. So then you look at what the capacity is for a 2-lane road, a 4-lane road, and you come up with the total capacity, divide that into your capital cost, and that's how you get to your $300.02. On commercial, again, as you would imagine, there's more vehicle trips with the commercial development, and again, ITE standards have given us that, as well as a trip adjustment factor. The length of the trip is shorter, but overall the vehicle miles traveled is more because of your number of vehicle trips into a commercial development. So again, using the same cost per unit, because you'd come up with $8,207 per square foot on commercial. This is just an example, again, getting down to the bottom line where you have the net cost of your capital, your vehicle miles traveled, and your unit cost, and then seeing the different calculations. Vehicle miles traveled, $18.71 for single family, getting to the fee, $13.14 for multifamily, $27.35 for commercial, and $6.51 for industrial, to come up with a cost per square feet. This is, again, any questions on this? We've got a lot of time to go through this if council has any more questions over the next.
Yes, I've got a question. When you're counting the commercial, aren't you double counting the residential if they're running to the commercial, or are you using a different factor there?
We're using a different factor just straight for commercial, so you're not counting it twice, but you still have to look at the traffic that's coming into the commercial development, and ITE manuals have the separation between the commercial and the single family so that you're not counting it twice.
So you're not counting it twice. You're not counting the retail where you might go grocery shopping and then you come back. You're counting the commercial, the traffic coming in. But isn't that also the residential that's being counted?
Well, it could be the residential that's being counted, but you're also, again, you're not doubling up because you're having different factors that you
I got you. Okay.
And the other thing that we do, too, is we also take into consideration what we call the pass-by factor, which is you might stop and get, a Starbucks on the way, or you might get that. We don't count those in either because those aren't separate trips or that puts extra capacity on the road.
Okay.
So what we have here is the existing and recommended fees of your current fees to the recommended fees and then the change. Overall, for all the non-utility fee areas, the current is $5,472 per residential dwelling unit. It's recommended to go to $10,459 for a change of $4,987. And as you can see, the majority of it is in your streets area. For multifamily, the change is $3,877. And again, it's in the streets area. For the commercial per square foot, the change is $6,162, and again, it is streets. And then the same with the industrial per square foot. One of the things that we always provide, because we get asked this, is how do we compare to other communities? And I'm always reluctant to present this because, again, as I mentioned in the very beginning, every community is unique. Every community has different service levels. Not every community has every fee. For example, on this chart here, Mesa looks so low. They don't have a transportation fee. They choose to pay for their cost out of their general fund. They just recently had a property tax approved, but they didn't even have a property tax. They paid their debt service. They don't have a fee for that. It's all in how you want to pay for things and what type of community you see. You may not have the same amenities in one town or city versus the other. And so if you look at this chart, you know, it puts them all together, but it may not be all the same type of fees, and again, definitely not the same service levels. The other thing is that this doesn't show any of the west or the east valleys, and they're much, much higher than this rate right here. Some are even upwards closer to $20,000 per single-family household. So what are the next steps in this process? Well, the next thing is the public hearing, which has been scheduled for July 2nd, 2009. You have to then wait 30 days after your public hearing to have the adoption of the fee and the IIP, which is scheduled for August 6th. And then you have to wait 75 days after the adoption of the fee for them to become effective, which would be November 1st, 2009. So as far as summary and recommendations, these are the proposed fees that we would like the council to consider for adoption. We would also recommend that you increase the fees annually based on the 20 city engineering news record index, cost construction index. And then to evaluate your capital plans annually, there are things within the state statutes that allow you to amend your IIP without going back and redoing fees, depending on what the elements of the change is. And then if there are major changes in community development statistics or economic trends, which we're seeing a lot of, then you may want to adjust your fees accordingly. But you don't have to. That's up to, it's a policy decision of the council. And with that, I'll open it up for any other questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Any additional questions? Thanks for the process instructions and the overview and the nifty calculations. Appreciate it.
Oh, we got one more.
Oh, we do have a question.
No, I don't have
Nope.
a question. I don't have a question, thank you. I just wanted to
Councilmember
make a
Dickey.
statement, Mayor.
Yes.
That this presentation illustrated a lot of the very strict rules, I would say, that govern the imposition and the collection and the use of impact fees. The legislature that passed a budget, not just through a committee on Tuesday, but that did pass it, is going to include an option that would allow municipalities, it's a voluntary, to replace their general fund dollars with impact fees and use them as such, as general fund, not with all of these categories, so that the state can withhold some revenue sharing funding to municipalities. The League of Cities and Towns presented to the city of Scottsdale, and I just wanted to suggest that we may want to ask them to possibly come here to one of our meetings, maybe a next meeting, depending on what's going on with the budget, because I think we should try to understand the implications should that pass, especially since now this is something that is pending action and a change for us, and it might be a good idea for us to know what's going on.
Thank you. I had heard today that may have been withdrawn, but you don't believe so?
The bills that passed included it. They only went through one committee, so there's a long road to go, and it may still be in there though. So we might want to ask for some more information on that.
Thank you. Yes.
Actually, I do have a question.
Henry, go ahead.
It's just a very quick question here. I understand the rationale for not making comparisons to other communities, that the calculations are based primarily on our capital and you move backwards from that, so forth and so on. Just looking at your chart here, I noticed on your bar graph that you have Fountain Hills current and then you have Fountain Hills proposed, which is the second bar down. I'm just curious, in terms of comparing to other communities, To the best of your knowledge, are any of those other communities that we'll be comparing our proposed to in the process of reviewing and/or increasing or adjusting their fees? You may not know that because they may not be your clients, but I'm just curious.
Mayor, Councilmember Leger, I know that the city of Mesa is undertaking a study right now as we speak to update their fees.
Okay.
So, again, you may see transportation fees in Mesa, but they're undertaking that. As far as the other ones go, I don't have that information on every one of them. What I will do is go back and do a little research and get it out
Sure.
to council.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And just as Councilmember Dickey said, there's nothing arbitrary to this. It's not subjective information, it's data that you're using. Thank you. I believe that gets us through the presentations. Now I'll call to the public. Anyone wishing to comment?
No, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Well, I'll move to the consent agenda. We did remove item number 2 from the consent agenda. I'm looking for a motion to approve items 2 and 3 on our consent agenda.
So
1 and 3.
I'm sorry, 1 and 3.
So moved.
Sorry about that.
Second.
All right, first, second. Roll call. Beth.
Councilmember Dickey?
Aye.
Mayor Schlum?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shambo?
Aye.
Councilmember Leger?
Aye.
Councilmember Hanson?
Aye.
Councilmember Cantino? Mayor, 6-0.
Thank you. Now move on to our regular agenda. First item is consideration of appointing 3 citizens to the Parks and Recreation Commission. I'm sorry, what's that?
That one we removed off of consent?
Oh, it's removed from consent. It's not going to be considered tonight.
Oh, okay.
Correct?
Totally got it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Vice Mayor, keeping us
Thank you,
straight.
sir.
All right, consideration of appointing 3 citizens to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Had some tremendous applicants, and it's great to see more and more folks looking to get involved in our community. I'll move to appoint Natalie Varela to fill the term ending in December 2010, Don Doty to fill the term ending December 2010, and Amy Sanders to fill the youth term ending December 2009. Could I get a second?
Second.
All right. Anyone from the public?
No, Mayor.
Any discussion, council? All right. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor's 6-0.
Thank you very much. I see a couple out there in the audience. Welcome, Amy. Thank you. I think Mr. Doty's out there as well. Thank you. I don't know if Natalie is here. Natalie is here. Thank you, Natalie, and thank you for others that have applied. Make sure you get plugged into other opportunities in our community, but thank you very much for your application. All right, our next item is we're going to have one report on items 5 through 7. Mr. Rogers will be giving presentations. First item is consideration of Resolution 2009-14, declaring the Town of Fountain Hills Zoning Ordinance Chapter 22 Planned Area Development District, dated May 7, 2009, a public record. Next item is public hearing regarding Ordinance 0903. And next item is going to be the consideration of that ordinance. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is a public hearing for a text amendment to the zoning ordinance. This amendment will create a new zoning chapter entitled Chapter 22 Planned Area Development, PAD District. This amendment will also create a new PAD zoning district. Planning and Zoning Commission voted at their September 11, 2008 meeting to initiate this zoning amendment. Following the public hearing process, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted at their regular meeting of April 9, 2009 to recommend approval of the ordinance. The Planned Area Development, or PAD zoning district, will be different from other zoning districts. The PAD district will be a freestanding zone that has its own regulations similar to other zoning districts, but a PAD can be approved by town council to go anywhere in town if it meets the guidelines and development standards. All zoning districts allow a certain density of development based on the general plan's land use designations, and the PAD district is no different. It will not be reliant on another underlying zoning district for density control. Rather, the permitted land uses and allowed densities in a PAD are based directly on the general plan's land use designations. The PAD district will have an approval process in which a rezoning and a development plan are considered simultaneously. The development plan will be reviewed and recommended for approval using a review process that includes at least one pre-application meeting, the submittal of a project narrative, and the submittal of a phasing plan whenever appropriate. Following a hearing and recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission, the complete proposed package with the rezoning, the development plan, any special conditions, etc., will be forwarded to Town Council for a hearing and a final decision as part of that rezoning process. This is the same process, virtually unchanged, currently required for Town Council approval of rezonings. However, in addition to the amended zoning map, a PAD request will also be accompanied by a specific plan of development and specific stipulations that effectively become the zoning requirements of the site if the Town Council approves the proposal. The PAD district will simplify the review of architectural, landscaping, and other design criteria related to a project's approval, which are currently located in numerous sections throughout the zoning ordinance, by consolidating all those requirements and guidelines into one comprehensive site-specific and project-specific package. PAD approval is entirely discretionary for the town and is not a by right designation. The additional approval criteria for a PAD are more substantial than current underlying zoning district criteria or even the PUD criteria, due to the higher design standards that may be required and the flexibility of design that will be allowed. One major concern has been raised that the PAD sounds like it's good for developers, but what benefits will be adopting the PAD be for the town? As the town nears build-out, we're facing more challenges on vacant lots as well as probability of redeveloping in some areas, especially some commercial areas. The PAD ordinance will allow the town to design developments to provide a maximum benefit and provide the best product for the town's citizens. Projects will not be solely developed and designed by the developers. The PAD will help when dealing with problems of topography or strange lot dimensions by providing for some flexibility in the design. The PAD will allow for better, more site-sensitive designs and will create a more strict architectural review process. Any PAD requires that 15% of any development be dedicated open space. Standard zoning works in most situations, but standard zoning has strict land use separation and dimensional requirements that may not allow us to get where we want to go. The PAD will allow that flexibility while maintaining the same density restrictions. It's important to remember that the zoning ordinance is a tool that we use to guide the town towards the land use goals that are outlined in the general plan. The PAD chapter of the zoning ordinance will be one chapter in that ordinance, and it becomes another method, one of many, at the town's disposal that we can use in moving the town towards the general plan's land use goals. Whether or not the PAD ordinance benefits developers should not be the primary concern. There's no doubt that developers will find benefits in a PAD ordinance. However, the primary concern should be whether or not the PAD ordinance benefits the town of Fountain Hills, and staff believes it will. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted unanimously to recommend the approval because they also believe it will benefit the town. Some PAD criteria to remember is the development plan is required in any proposal. Any PAD must conform to the general plan land use and density regulations. Single-family residential PAD developments must have at least 10 acres to even qualify. Mixed-use, commercial, or multifamily PAD developments must have at least 2.5 acres to qualify. The PAD process essentially combines a concept plan, a plat, a rezoning, and a sort of development agreement all into one package that must conform to the general plan land use and density designations before it will even be considered. Then, during the review process, the town can apply whatever other design criteria or conditions they deem appropriate. The PAD district will provide for innovative and flexible development within the town of Fountain Hills, and staff recommends town council vote to approve the proposed PAD zoning amendment as presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're taking all these three items on concurrently in one report, so we can comment on and have discussion on the resolution and the ordinance at this time. Councilmember Dickey?
Mayor, does that mean somebody has to make a motion before we discuss? or not? Because we're doing a hearing first?
No.
No.
No, we do not need a motion at this time. Is there public comment on
No,
these
Mayor.
items? Okay. I'd like to hear that, but I'd like to have discussion.
A couple questions then. Thank you. The cities that were listed as having the PAD, is there a difference between charter or general law on being able to adopt this? Maybe.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Dickey, I don't believe that a charter affects the Zoning Enabling Act. It's occupies all of the law on zoning, whether you're a charter city or not. There has for years been a misconception that charter cities have the authority for some things in zoning that general law cities and towns do not, and most zoning attorneys in town don't believe that the enabling law is what it is, depending upon, regardless of the size of the city.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, then, the list here, is this including pretty much everybody that you would think in the county or in our area? Because I see that Scottsdale and Paradise Valley are not listed. Is there?
No, it's not all inclusive. We just grabbed 6 cities that were quickly grabbable off their websites.
Okay, I would be curious if Paradise Valley had this, or Scottsdale, if somehow in the course of this we could find that out. If you would allow me, Mayor, just a couple more things. Does this have any Prop 207 ramifications if something's already been purchased and then we put a PAD zoning on it?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember, I believe that just like every other rezoning that we do in terms of a text amendment has no Prop 207 issues when it is a new zone like this one created out of whole cloth. Applying that zone to a piece of property could create a 207 claim, but this would be a voluntary zone, so anybody who was asking for this would be signing a 207 waiver for us anyway.
Thank you.
Good. Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Bob, could you mention the 4 things that it included again? It was concept plan, the plat. What were the?
Concept plan, plat, rezoning, and a sort of development agreement, because you're adding all the stipulations and whatever other agreements you're adding.
Mr. Councilmember Archambault, or Vice Mayor Archambault, that is, most PADs have what we call a project narrative that essentially is the document that creates the zoning law for that particular PAD. There's some underlying requirements that apply to all PAD districts, but when you have one that sits as a hard zoning category like this does rather than an overlay as some do, it is a custom-made zoning ordinance so that when it comes before you, you all will have a detailed description of what can and cannot go on in there, and allows you great flexibility over items that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do under your regular zoning categories. It allows you to be as flexible or as strict as you need to be based upon the conditions on the site.
Does it allow us to be as flexible as to look at something and say, well, we don't like the way that building looks or that way that's situated, and we actually tell them to change it?
Yes.
So it gives us more flexibility than we would have just approving a zoning or a waiver on setbacks or, cut and fills.
You could do those too, but yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you tell me, Bob, how the pad, if it's requested by a property owner, would guard against the diminishment or some sort of a impact on the integrity or the protection of adjoining neighbors or neighborhoods? What, if you could go over some of the things you mentioned on the onset about the general plan and some of those items.
Well, if I'm
If there's land adjacent to, say, I live next to a property that's going to consider a PAD district, and what type of understanding would I have as a property owner adjacent to that the land is going to generally be what I expected it was going to be?
Well, you can expect that, assuming it's a residential property next to where you live, that the density will not be increased because the density is laid out in the general plan. It's not in the zoning district. The zoning district could allow for some setback variation or some smaller sized lots, reconfigurations, but it wouldn't increase the density. The general underlying land use category, being single family, wouldn't change. Whatever was in the general plan would be required to do that as well. So 1 acre zoning, typically now, you would still, if it was a 10-acre lot next to you, you wouldn't expect to see any more than 10 houses, 1 per acre, whether it was a PAD or whether it was a standard subdivision.
On that 1 10-acre parcel, residential, could the homes be more densely placed in one portion of that lot and still maintain the overall density across the entire lot?
Yes, it could, more like a cluster design type of a thing, yes. And in actuality, the PAD would require that they provide at least 15% of the project as open space.
Vice Mayor?
I just want to clarify something, Bob. The general plan would classify like R143 or 1 acre, I think that's 1 acre, isn't it?
R143, yes.
The general plan would classify that as a low density?
Yes.
So what's the definition of low density? Can that not even be as low as R135?
Well, the general plan right now has a number of categories, very low, low, and medium density, and it is outlined in the general plan. And I believe the low density is between 1 and 2.5 units per acre, so somewhere in that range.
So if you had a 10-acre lot, you could get 25 units on there if you could figure out how to do it with a pad.
Well, it would have to go. It would have to be in general conformance with the general plan and also get through planning and zoning and council to do that.
Yeah, I understand that, but I guess my question is, if the general plan says low density and low density is divided in the general plan as 1 to 2.5 homes per acre, then you could have an R143 and you're stripping that zoning away, and somebody's got a 10-acre piece and then they come up with a way to put 20 houses on there, or 20 units.
They could attempt to max it out.
With the general plan though, correct?
They could attempt to max it out. Of course, you've got the open space requirement and any other requirements that were tacked on that would probably limit that. But
I think that's probably what concerns us the most, is that we're stripping the underlying zoning, and so I'm kind of jumping off of the mayor's question. If you live in an area where you have an R143 and somebody's got a, we were looking at the map the other day, somebody's got a 10-acre piece so they can do a pad on it, that person could, the surrounding residents could be looking at something that could be 15 or 12 or 14 houses where you might expect, well, okay, they can do 10. And I think that's where the question was going, and I just wanted to elaborate on that.
I did misspeak. The general plan calls low density, actually R143 would be very low density.
Okay.
1 acre or more. You have to get down to R135 or R118 before you can go up to any higher than that.
Okay. Well, then that puts it more in perspective. Thank you, Bob.
Good. Mayor? Councilmember Leger?
Looking at the staff report here, there's a comment in there. It says, not adopting the PAD ordinance will maintain the current ordinance standards of the development and require any proposed project to comply with the underlying zoning district use and density allowances. I've lived in this town for 18 years, and I believe that our current zoning ordinances have served us extremely well. I believe that you're looking at your largest parcels of land, all of them currently have development agreements that we've come to terms with. When you back off and look at the community in general, you have very few, if any, 10-acre parcels that this would be applicable to. I'm not quite sure what, in the larger picture, what the advantages would be given all of the zoning districts we have currently, looking at the PUD as well as the TCCD that we just went through and changed and revised, that gives a great deal of flexibility to commercial properties. So that's pretty much where I'm coming from. I'm really concerned about the citizenry in terms of if I move into a neighborhood that has a very specific character and it's zoned a very specific way, we talk about compatibility. There's no guarantee that if someone decides to redevelop several years from now a large parcel of land or raise or level a particular area, that in fact there will be compatibility with the existing neighborhood. As we've spoken before, I think that it's just too wide open. I mean, it's just too wide open. When I look at commercial properties, I mean, cut and fill goes out the window, you know, and many things start going out the window without having limitations on height in particularly neighborhoods that are redeveloped. That really concerns me, as well as no limitations on cut and cut and fill. When I look at the other comparative communities with respect to where the PAD has been effective, a lot of these communities are way into the early stages of development and have significant tracts of land that perhaps, if we started here with a PAD, that would have made more sense. So I have some significant angst over this, and I've also had an opportunity to attend planning and zoning hearings, and I've heard some very, very legitimate concerns raised by folks in the community. Some of them were a little far-reaching, and conspiracy theories. You know, I'm moving away from some of those, but some of the basic issues with respect to the character of our particular town and where we are. If I was to look at a PAD, I'd feel more comfortable at taking a look at this in 5, 10 years from now, or maybe 15 years from now, when we get to that point of leveling and raising and engaging in redevelopment. So those are my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember. Ginny.
Mayor, thank you. I have a couple of comments also. Like on number 5, when it says, why do we need this ordinance now, and we talk about the economic downturn, even though I understand we all have to be aware of that, I don't want to overreact or to have that necessarily color our actions that much. I think that to give credit to the leaders before us who put the zoning in place, we all agree that this is a beautiful community. I would like to be protective of that and not take an action that possibly is done because we're experiencing what we're experiencing now. And I also, the other part of that is then if this attracts potential economic investment, I want to know why. It seems like then maybe we are doing something to have people build something or do something here in town that normally we might not allow under normal circumstances, or at least would scrutinize more under normal times. So that does concern me. The other cities that are mentioned, I think there are probably cities where a PAD would tend to upgrade the property or would give it more value. I don't necessarily feel that that would be the case in Fountain Hills because, again, like I say, I think everything here has been very well planned and very well done. And then I know that you said this is not a by right zoning. It would not be a by right. I think you said, zoning, I think was the last word you said. But what I think I wanted to say from our point of view, that yes, it'll go to the council. All of this stuff would go to the council. But just from my reaction, when we do any kind of a waiver, variance, special use, anything like that, the overwhelming is, I'm sorry, I'm not being very articulate, you have more pressure to say yes under those circumstances because here's the law, here's what you have. And so if somebody presents something like with the property up north, where I think we very painstakingly went through what we wanted to do, I think we showed good sense that we knew that there were things to do to make it a better project. We were certainly willing to do that and to listen, and I have confidence in that. I think with the PAD, we might have more of a pressure to say yes. So that's just kind of my political feeling of what might happen. And yes, the mechanics are there, yes, the council would have to look at it, but I think you get pushed to say yes on one side, and you get pushed to say no on the other, and maybe right now I'm still more in the push to say no, give me a really good reason, but we have indicated and demonstrated ability to look at those and to not just draw a line in the sand. So I am still having some reservations.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Bob, the project that we currently have a development agreement on with the commercial area over here, would this pad significantly have helped that project?
Well, it's hard to say how much it would have helped it. They would have certainly had a lot more options in their building designs and placements, and so yes, it would have helped that process out a little bit. I would think. How, if it would have changed the project very significantly, who's to say at this point?
I guess I suppose that's asking for speculation, but I'm trying to in my head try to figure out. I've been hearing some pushback on residential, and I'm wondering if the pad wouldn't be more applicable towards commercial to try to help us to develop our commercial areas that we need. I know we got SWABAC going and looking at things, and if the pad wouldn't be more applicable to that, then it would be to residential. We've already got residential that's zoned R16. With a pad, could you have tighter residential than that?
The density wouldn't change. It would be that same density.
Clustering would, potentially.
Well, it wouldn't change the density of the overall project. It would just maybe make the lots smaller by clustering them.
Well, I guess I'm thinking of our general plan, and if you think of the area that's zoned R16, I'm not sure where that falls. It's not multifamily, is it
That's
high
single
density?
family. That's single family, medium density, I think they call
Medium
it.
density? Yeah. So, again, using the acreage thing, what would that allow per acre?
R16 allows 7 dwelling units per acre.
Okay.
I think what I'm picking up is a part of that question is an R16 is in medium density, single family, well, according to the general plan. What else is within medium density on the general plan?
In the general plan, R16, R18, and R110. So R16 is the most dense in medium density.
So if there was an R110 zoning currently, does that mean that a pad, that area would be allowed to go down to an R16?
My understanding would be yes.
Okay. I think we're going
Or would
to
be-
have some more dialogue on that. I think I saw a card come in. Thank you,
Wendy
Bob.
Rydell?
Welcome.
Thank you. Mayor, member of your council, my name is Wendy Riddell with the law firm of Berry & Demore. It's my pleasure to be back here this evening. I heard a couple of things said about the PAD ordinance, and I really just wanted to clarify. The PAD ordinance enhances the council's ability to control a project. It gives you the ultimate say-so, and you don't have that ultimate say-so today under your zoning ordinance. You can't deny a case today because you may not necessarily like the architecture or the placement of the building. What we're really trying to do is give that control to the council. Councilman Leger made the statement, there's no guarantee that there's going to be compatibility. I would say there is a guarantee, and that guarantee rests here with the council, with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and with the town staff. This ordinance requires developers to prove up that they deserve to have some modification of the standards. And if you don't like what they prove up, you are under no obligation to approve it. It also, to be very clear, is processed just as any other zoning case. Every neighbor gets notification. Every homeowners association gets notification. There is a process in place. There's a substantial, in fact, a substantially greater amount of documentation that's required under the PAD ordinance than is required with a typical application. And of course, there's the public hearing process as well. Just wanted to make sure those points are clear. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'd also be happy to answer questions about PV in Scottsdale. I do a lot of work there as well. Scottsdale does in fact have a PAD ordinance, and Paradise Valley is a little bit different. But
Thank you, Ms. Brunel. Appreciate it. Yes.
I don't necessarily need to address you, Wendy, if you'd like to sit down,
sure.
or if you'd like to stay standing, it's really your choice.
You might risk the timer going off.
You may, no, you're fine. My comments are going to be general, and I appreciate your comments and your perspective on this. When I talk, you're absolutely correct. I mean, this gives more authority to the council. Maybe that concerns me, because it becomes more political. And if I live in a neighborhood, and people live in a neighborhood, citizens in this town buy into a zoning district, and they understand what the expectations are in that zoning district and the adjacent zoning districts. That's what concerns me. When people buy property in this town, most people, believe me, do an incredible amount of due diligence, and they know what can possibly be on that acre next to them, the parcel next to them. And that's kind of where I'm coming from, more from a citizen's perspective than a politician's perspective or a developer's perspective. And that's, we just have a difference of opinion on that.
And I just one statement.
I'm not sure we're debating here, Mayor, are we?
I just want to say, I personally do have faith in this council, and I think a lot of members of the community do.
I'm not talking about this council. I'm talking about councils in general. I believe that when it comes to these types of issues, development in a community, the rules, if you may, or the zoning districts, if you may, need to be clear enough for citizens to understand those, and particularly when you talk about compatibility and redevelopment of neighborhoods. And if a developer, well-intended, and a council, well-intended, start with a clean slate, there's a positive there, but there's a concern that that's a little too carte blanche for me, particularly with on the commercial side of it, with cut and fill and hillside disturbances. I mean, this thing can just, it just does not fit the character of our town. So I think we have philosophical differences on this, and we could probably go back for a long time on this.
I'd certainly be happy to debate them with you in another forum. I just wanted to be clear that it would have to go through a public process. Anyone that was taking advantage of the PAD.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Riddell. Was there another comment you had, Vice Mayor? No? Nope. Okay. The planning and zoning was alluded to, took a methodical, public, deliberate approach to this, and I credit them with doing so. That's the same approach I'd like our town council to take here tonight. In our packets and in the public packet, there's a pad chronology of events that's probably relevant to point out, maybe more detail than what Bob went over. This was begun discussions back in September of '06. So before the state trust land was purchased, in advance of that by about a half a year, as something for the town council to consider in order to do just what the PAD describes in its, I don't know what you'd call it, the purpose and intent segment of the actual PAD, Chapter 22, which is to give council and staff and property owners the ability to create a property that's better, more unique, than what might be currently available with the current tools. So with that, it is a significant change, and it requires a careful and deliberate pace. So I think what our P&Z Commission followed was a good one. Questions brought up thus far are terrific. I'm encouraging more from the public as an ongoing basis with staff and with our council members directly as we consider this. At this point, I would like to continue to consider continuing this item to our potentially the next meeting, or a meeting that would work for the staff and those interested.
So I'll ask our town attorney, given the structure of our agenda here, items 5 through 7, and a public hearing and such, if I were looking to do that, would I simply make a motion to continue items 5 through 7?
Mr. Mayor, the only constraint you have is with respect to the advertising requirements that we have for the meetings. If you want to continue the public hearing without having to re-advertise it again, going back to the, I believe it's quarter-page ads that we do for the zoning cases, then you would need to continue to a date specific. So pick a specific meeting and continue it to that one. If you just have a motion to continue in general, staff will have to re-advertise for that next meeting, whatever it is.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So again, we would have to get agreement here tonight on a date or publish a date in the future.
Mr. Mayor, if the motion will need to contain a specific date of a council meeting if you want to preserve the previous advertisement notification. Otherwise, a motion to continue will just require us to re-advertise in the newspaper.
Okay, thank you. I think in light of exposure, perhaps it would be better advertising it rather than continue to a specific date and give us time to consult with staff as council members, deliberate with staff individually as council members, and give some input, and based on that maybe staff could then decide on a date that's probably best to bring it back, and then the advertisement will allow the public additional advertisement of when it might come back. So I would like to make a motion to continue this
Mayor,
to a later date.
if I may.
Yes, Councilmember Leger.
I would agree with you. I think planning and zoning did a tremendous job on the mechanics and moving through the process, looking at public input. I attended some of those P&Z meetings, probably 2, if not 3 occasions. P&Z stepped back from voting. They engaged in continuances. They reshaped things. They took public input. This process has been ongoing for a significant amount of time. I'm not sure there's a council member up here that hasn't had ample time to speak with staff. As a matter of fact, last week, my Councilman Archambault invited me to a meeting to listen to staff present their position and be available for questions and defend their position if you may, and they did a tremendous job with that. The mechanics of all of this are relatively clear, and with respect to more time, you're going to be working through the details. So I just think that the time has come, and I think that we have a development right now that's being queued up, and I think they kind of need to know for their own purposes where we stand on this, and I don't think continuation is going to really help anyone. So that's my thought on continuation.
Thank you.
You got a motion?
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Is my motion all right, Andrew? To a
The
later
motion
date.
is to continue all 3 items
Yes, to a later date.
to a future council meeting.
Future council meeting. Council meeting.
And just waiting on a second then.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second for the mayor.
All right, thank you. Discussion?
Yeah.
The purpose of continuances, for my perspective, is based on what I had said. This is a significant change, adoption potentially, and it was largely for the public to have the opportunity, as they have through the public hearings with the P&Z. Although I know that P&Z gets great attention, I know council meetings may get greater attention being televised and otherwise, to give the public opportunity to be aware and to comment, as well as for council to have more time as well. But appreciate your timeline and your points as well. But I think this is a significant issue enough to take our time on, given that so much has already gone into it. I think from your comments, I might know which way you'd go tonight. But in light of the fact that folks have been working on this since September of 2006, it's got many people that believe there's a great deal of value in this, so I respect what you've said. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I know we've all said this before at one time or another, but I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think there might be some value here, although I'm hearing very loud some of the concerns that my fellow council members have. And I think some of those can be addressed, you know, whether it makes it more restrictive and not as loose as maybe staff would like it. I think we need to start looking at this and maybe using it as another tool. But one of the things I'm going to be looking at, and I'm going to be looking at it hard, is how will this zoning add to the quality of life to the citizens? How will it benefit Fountain Hills? And those are two major questions that I think we have to answer, and I think we have to answer it in our own minds to our own satisfaction. I don't think I've gotten that answer yet. I dig for it, you know, and maybe it'll just take a matter of going out and visiting with some of the cities that have PAD zonings and talk to some of those planners and say, how did this work for you? Show me some of the developments that came forward. You know, what were the challenges? I mean, I can see this PAD working if you had a site that had a specific feature on it that you're trying to preserve, and it makes the site, you know, just not usable for the cost of what you pay for the land, and then you would use a PAD. Although I still am not convinced that there aren't tools that we have at our disposal that we can't use to work with. So I've still got to do some more research on this, and I think that's where I'm at right now.
Mayor,
So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
if I may.
Councilmember Leger?
You know, I think that's you know, it's a good concept, and it's a great idea to take the pad and then start taking the pad away, the ordinance that is, and start putting all this criteria in it. If you do that, I think you lose the intent of what the pad was intended for. And then what I see happening, because we've had this conversation, you start replicating other zoning districts, and you come full circle when you start restricting cut and fill, when you start restricting height, setbacks, so forth and so on. Because if we went down that road, if you want to go down that road, those are the types of things that concern me, concern the citizens. We've had several public hearings with P&Z. There may not be a lot of people that are pushing back here, but since this whole process has started, I've received a lot of personal contact regarding this, and people have, you know, expressed their opinion. And we can do another public hearing, and, you know, maybe have hopefully we could pack the place. You know, I'm not sure of that. But if we start tweaking this and reworking it, then I'm sure we have something that becomes a hybrid, that it doesn't even meet the intent of where we were going with it. It's a creative solution, but I think it's like we'll be chasing our tail. So my intent is not to sound critical, but I think that's where we will land. With respect to commercial, we looked at the TCCD, and the Kavanaugh project, for example, can be enhanced tremendously within the context of the TCCD with respect to the SWABAC feedback. SWABAC looked at Kavanaugh and said there's a whole lot of things that you can do in terms of orientation of buildings, so forth and so on, placement of buildings. All those things could be realized within the TCCD that we just put in place, by the way. We just put that zoning in place. We relaxed our commercial zoning for that purpose. So once again, that's just where I'm coming from.
Question, staff.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just remember that the motion on the floor is to continue, so our discussion is supposed to be related only to continuance and not to substantive topics surrounding it.
Thank you. Councilmember Dickey?
Okay, I'll maybe stretching a little bit. My first comment was that I would support you, out of respect for you, to continue this, and so that's to that. But in continuing it, I would expect certain things at that next meeting, which would include why we can't do things that need to be done, examples of what we cannot do now that we need this for. Because when you talked about the timeline, which started in 9606, that's exactly a good reason why I would, because at that time, it was way before the project up there, I would rather do specific things with specific projects with people I trust than, so if it had come up way before this, I really would have been reticent to go ahead. Now I see something that I feel positive about, but I would like to know what we can't do unless we have a pad. That's what I would need when we continue this. Come back to the subject.
Councilmember Hanson?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Leger made a very compelling argument for the way he feels, and I would be comfortable voting tonight.
Thank you. Anything, Councilman Cantino?
Call for the question.
All right. We've got the motion to continue. All right. All in favor of continuing, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Mayor, 3-3.
3-3.
Fail.
Motion to continue fails.
Okay.
All right, further discussion on any of these items or a motion?
Do we have, public hearing?
No, right now we have to either have continued discussion on the entire items or move to a motion on consideration of the resolution, correct? All right. I think what we're looking at here with discussion continuing on these three items, particularly the pad, is the item of discretion of council. Seems to be an issue that comes up as a concern here. Could we have staff speak to that to the extent that you can? When you look at the pad itself, it gives quite a bit of it gives the ultimate agreement to the council in most cases here. Can you speak to that and to how you address that in relation to what the council maybe perhaps cannot agree to when changing zoning? I'm not sure how to ask the question, but I hear from Councilman Leger in particular, I heard one point about leaving it up to the council, some of these land use or zoning items within the pad.
There are a number of items that will be looked at as part of the PAD approval that the council will have some leeway with. Ultimately, the entire PAD project has to comply with the general plan. Otherwise, even council can't approve it. So it can't just be totally off the wall. It has to comply with the provisions in the general plan. Minor things that are common to most zoning ordinances, like setbacks, lot sizes, things like that, could be tweaked by the council. Generally, it would be tweaked before they got to the council. The council will be presented with a final package that, in staff's opinion, met the general plan requirements. And at that point, council could either bow to pressure and approve it, or tweak it themselves in other ways that they thought was appropriate.
Now, in light of giving flexibility to create a development we'd all be just enamored by, which would be, the perfect outcome here. In respect to residential property that might fold into a pad, when you're talking about density and zoning, isn't there the opportunity that you illustrated with an R110 to something with a greater density or a lesser density or greater density within the general plan? The densities can change under a pad, isn't that correct?
It would change within the given general plan designation. You could move up and down a little bit according to whichever that designation was, yes. Where we were talking about the R16, R18, and R110 all being within the same general plan designation.
But if it's within that general plan designation, it would give flexibility to council or to developer or whomever along the way, ultimately council, to approve a change, a pad design that would be more dense than what the underlying zoning is, correct?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Bob, are all pads alike all the zoning pads that the different cities and towns have that you've explored, are they all like this one? Or
They all have similar characteristics, but they're all slightly different.
Yeah, can you explain to us what's different from one city maybe to another that you've looked at? Maybe, obviously, we've heard up here that tweaking it just won't do it, but I'm wondering if there isn't something that can be changed to maybe make it more appealing or more beneficial for the town in our zoning that we've got here. And I'm trying to figure out what I don't have anything to compare this to. This is a new ordinance to all of us. We haven't had a chance to look at what other cities and towns' ordinances, their pad ordinances look like. And I think that would be beneficial, and it's one of the reasons why I was going to ask for after we moved to continue.
Well, I can certainly provide the council with the other ordinances that we found, and I can actually try to find a few more to go by. There are going to be some pads that only deal with residential. There are going to be some that only deal with commercial or mixed-use projects, and then there are some like we're proposing that would allow for a pad in all three situations.
Well, see, and that's, I guess what I was getting at is I'm wondering if we wouldn't be better off taking baby steps and saying, well, let's look at a pad that addresses commercial or mixed use, and then maybe expanding on that if we see some benefit to it. But I think the problem that I'm hearing everybody struggle up here with is we really just don't see the benefit yet, and I think if we'd have had some projects in front of us, or if we'd have had some planners from other cities and towns in here that said, here's something that we created that we weren't able to do with our current zoning, I think that's kind of where I'm at. That's what I need to see. Maybe baby steps is better than taking the leap of faith.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. There are some pretty broad items in here that, for example, item J under 2205, talks about additional standards development within a pad shall conform to all existing codes and ordinances, unless modifications of specific conditions, requirements, and standards are agreed to by the applicant and the town. So it's the additional standards could be things that a neighborhood in an area may have been somewhat reliant upon as something that they saw comfort in not changing.
Well, what I think that meant to say was that the underlying standards are going to apply unless you agree that they don't, not the other way around.
Okay, thank you. Could end up the same place, right? Okay. Appreciate that. All right. Well, I am not going to make a motion. I'll wait for one of you folks if our discussion is concluded on item number 5.
Is the hearing over?
No.
We haven't got the hearing yet. We're still on the resolution.
We are looking.
Can we reintroduce the motion to continue?
Pardon me?
I'm asking Andrew a question.
Sorry, Sam.
I guess you could if you somehow felt that the result was going to be different.
Oh, yeah. Well, you wouldn't let us discuss something else before, so I wanted to get it out there and see if it changed anybody's mind.
Maybe I jumped the gun on the continuance.
All right. Well, we won't go down that road again.
All right. Councilmember Dickey.
Mayor, thank you. So if we did come back with something that was different, then it could be brought back up, no matter what happens right now. If some of the stuff that the Vice Mayor was talking about, some changes, modifications to what we're being presented right now, to the best of your ability.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Dickey, we would endeavor to try and figure out exactly what it is that would come back up to meet the request. I can tell you that what you are going to find in terms of PAD ordinances is they are exactly what you all are identifying. They're designed to be very flexible documents that allow the council, in a lot of cases, to drill down on things that they're not allowed to do under the regular zoning ordinance. The PAD is not exclusively a tool of new development areas, but almost exclusively. It is very commonly used in commercial redevelopment. It is almost always included now in large-scale residential developments being developed all over the valley, mainly because it gives the kind of control over the development that the council otherwise doesn't have. So we can find all that for you, but I think what you're going to find is you have some like this that are a zoning ordinance unto itself, its own category, and a few others that are overlay zones that lie on top of the underlying zoning category and change some of the restrictions underneath them. This is significantly more flexible than your current version of this, which is the RUPD, which has been around for, gosh, I don't know, at least 10 years now we've had that in place. So we'll try to bring it all back to you. We're just not quite sure. And I don't know that I could tell these guys what to provide at this point. And we still have the issue of these things still being open as an item. We don't have any kind of direction in the motion.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to put a motion on the floor that we direct staff to come back to this council with an ordinance that PAD unit that addresses commercial and mixed use. Is that an appropriate motion?
I think that the appropriate motion would be more apt to have to go back to P&Z if it's going to narrow down to just be commercial and mixed use only. That's a significant enough change that we'll have to send it back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Okay. So we prefer to have the motion to send this case back to Planning and Zoning with that modification in mind.
Right. Okay. So I'll amend the motion to send this PAD development back to Planning and Zoning to change the configuration to look at commercial and mixed use only. Okay.
No second?
I made it.
All right.
Mayor,
Councilmember Dickey.
I'd like to move consideration of Resolution 2009.
Councilmember Dickey.
It wasn't second.
1 second. Yes, because I may not be able to ask this after you make your motion. Andrew, can you explain a bit of a difference between a development agreement and what a development agreement would allow and a PAD would allow?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, a PAD zoning ordinance is a text amendment that puts into place another zoning district, much like R143, R118, R16, whatever the districts are. It is required to be amended just as any other zoning ordinance provision is required to be implemented the same way as any other zoning ordinance provision. So if you had your example neighborhood of the 10-acre lot with R143 zoning, if the person wanted to develop that in anything other than 10 one-acre lots or whatever after we take the net out of it, accounting for the topography and development of streets and things like that, if they wanted to get to a higher level of density, they'd have to rezone it. Same thing with the PAD. It would require rezoning just like any other. So you need to think of this kind of a PAD as, R1 question mark, or not even, it's commercial as well. The difference between that and a development agreement is the development agreement is a specific contract between the town and the developer on a specific project that PAD zoning may be a part of, and many times is. There'll be a development agreement that's implemented through a PAD zoning text amendment, or an actual site amendment that implements a PAD zoning category. A lot of times you will find that the two documents work hand in hand. Other times you'll find that a development agreement is able to be implemented using straight zoning categories underneath it. The development agreement for the Hellman property right now has all straight zoning categories underneath it and could be built, I believe, under all those categories as they currently exist. So we don't have that marriage of the two things in this particular case. However, they are very different animals. One is public hearings required, neighborhood meetings required, and Planning and Zoning Commission is required to approve it. Under a development agreement, that's just a contract that the council approves between you and the development. So They accomplish many of the same goals, a lot of times work together, but are completely independent documents.
So the main difference here, there are restrictions to the development agreement that may be greater than there are here in certain areas, but the main difference is this would be a public process. This would go through the planning and zoning and the town council.
Well, and another issue I think is key in terms of the differences between the two is that a development agreement is for a term, whatever the term may be, sometimes 10, sometimes 15, sometimes 20 years. PAD zoning, if implemented on a piece of property, unless you have some sort of termination provisions in it, and a lot of PAD zoning ordinances of old had that provision in, that if within 2 years you didn't get a site plan approved, the PAD could be reverted back. Those are going away more now. They're not necessarily around as readily as they were, even though some still exist, and I'm in the middle of a few reversions at this particular moment. But once in place, if not conditioned upon time, the zoning that you grant via PAD is the same as granting R143 or R135. It is in place. It runs with the land. It's a fixed entitlement that if it lasts for 50 years and the development agreement only lasts for 10, the zoning is still there. So it needs to be shown for what it is. It is hard zoning on the property that just happens to have absolute discretion and flexibility in this body to determine what the elements of that zone are. And it is usually used in large developments to handle mixed use. There aren't many zoning codes in the valley that have a good mixed use category that works very well. So a lot of times, instead of evolving their planning documents, people will use PADs as the bridge so that the developers can come to the table with a project in hand and designed so that you can go from soup to nuts. You can see what the buildings are going to look like. You can see the architecture, the design themes, the color schemes, and everything else that you won't get in a regular zoning category. All of that is in a PAD, so that the information required up front is significantly more than a regular zoning case, if that helps.
There are many municipalities where PADs were reviewed by our staff before bringing this forward to P&Z and to council. One of them is Avondale. From what you can tell, is our PAD similar to Avondale's?
This PAD provision is similar in the sense that it is a hard zoning category rather than an overlay. Also, probably about as flexible. I think that the limitations on size here are potentially smaller than they are in Avondale, mostly due to geography, that there are a lot more wide open spaces there than there are here. I believe that the minimum PAD out there used to be as much as 40 acres, but I think it's shrunk down now. So, in terms of basic philosophy, they are very similar, but and I believe that this type of PAD is a lot more common today than the overlay version, but I haven't gone back to all the cities and towns to know for sure. And then the most ridiculous overlay PAD type of system is the special use process in Paradise Valley that we don't want to go anywhere near.
Thank you. Any additional comments? All right, we are back to needing a motion. Councilmember Dickey.
I move Resolution 2009-14, declaring the Town of Fountain Hills zoning ordinance, Chapter 22, Planned Area Development District, dated 5/7/09, a public record pursuant to ARS 9-801.
You're moving to
That's the resolution, right?
adopt the resolution. Do we have a second?
Second.
We took public comment on all these prior, correct? Or do we have any public comment on this additional item? Item 5 by itself, which is resolution. Would anyone like to comment on that item?
Ms. Rydell, did you wish to comment?
All right.
I have a question. Depending on how this goes, do we go any further to the next? I'm confused.
We will take a motion and then we'll vote on this, and if this does not pass, we will not see items 6 and 7, I would suspect, right, Andrew?
That's correct, because the resolution is necessary to declare the document a public record before we move forward.
Unless we have a public document that doesn't
do much.
The resolution and ordinance combination is actually just a technicality built in by the state statutes. If you pass something by ordinance, you're required to publish in the newspaper in full the entire document. And as Councilmember Hanson will know, that the clerk's budget gets very strained if we do everything by ordinance when they're 10 or 15 or 20 pages long. So the process in the state statutes allows you to declare a public record of a larger document and then adopt it by reference with the ordinance.
It would make the paper happy, though.
Yes, make a lot of papers happy.
Also process question on the motion. The motion is to approve resolution, correct?
That was the first item, so that's what...
Would that be, and a motion to second, can a person that makes a motion to approve vote nay on their own motion?
Yeah, they're all motioning together.
Imagine yes, I just want to make sure.
Mr. Mayor.
I should ask Councilmember Hanson, or Council.
Mr. Mayor, yes, it has happened before that people have made a motion and voted against their own motion.
Thank you very much. I just haven't seen that, so I just want to make sure it's allowed. All right.
Happens all the time.
So we have a motion and a second. I know it wanted to be heard, so a motion and a second. So how about a roll call on this one?
Councilmember Cantino?
No.
Mayor Schlum?
No.
Councilmember Dickey?
Nay.
Councilmember Hanson?
Nay.
Vice Mayor Shambo?
Nay.
Councilmember Leger?
Nay.
Mayor, 1, 2, 5.
Oh, you got
Six. I think it was all six nay.
It was 6-0.
Did you vote nay?
Or was it? Well, I said no, so I threw you off. I should have said nay.
You can bring it back.
06.
Thank you. All right, so items 6 and 7 will not be heard tonight, correct, Andrew? Thank you, staff. Item number 8 is consideration of renewing the proposed contract between Town of Fountain Hills and Rural Metro for fire and emergency services for a 5-year period beginning July 1, ending July 30 of 2014. In the amount of $2,852,368 for fire and emergency services. I'm going to first see if anyone wants to call, has any public comment, and then I will look for a motion to table since there are some items that we do not have yet to consider from Rural Metro to consider this.
No public comment.
So I want to keep it on the agenda in case there were people here with public comment, but now I'll look for a motion to table this to our May 21st meeting.
Mayor, I move we table to our May 21st meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mayor, 6-0.
Thank you very much. Now we'll look for a quarterly update by Director of Planning and Zoning on activities and projects, Mr. Richard Turner.
Thank you, Mayor Schlum. Mayor Schlum and members of the Town Council, to begin with regard to the former state trust land, on April the 20th, the Supreme Court of the State of Arizona let stand an appellate court ruling which upheld a lower court finding that referendum petitions filed in the Elman rezoning and general plan amendment case were invalid. So that means that your action of May the 15th of last year is a valid action, and we have gone ahead and made the change to the official town zoning map to put that zoning on the books, and our master plan, or our general plan, has also been officially amended. We would anticipate that in the near future, the Elman companies would present to the town a master subdivision plat for that property. We've had some previous discussions in that regard. That is a very important ruling, and also reinvigorates our efforts with regard to updating our general plan. That area of the town, the former state trust land, is about 11% of the total land area of the town, and now that we know what the zoning is and what the approved land uses are, it allows us to move forward with that update process with more purpose. And I have met and had discussions with the planning firm that is helping us with that effort, and we have a new schedule for moving forward at a quicker pace. We would hope to finish the Planning Commission subcommittee deliberations, and public open house, public hearings before the Planning Commission and Town Council early fall. With regard to some regulation updates that we're working on, you will soon see 2 changes to the sign regulations on your agenda. The first is going to remove the requirement that an A-frame sign be within 20 feet of the front door of a business. That will obviously allow a lot more flexibility with regard to the location of an A-frame sign. We're still requiring or limiting the number of A-frame signs to 1 per business. Also, the other change would be permitting larger stores, non-residential buildings, to have larger signs. That is in response to some suggestions made by members of the Board of Adjustment when they heard the variance application for the Bashes sign. So we responded to that. We see both of these changes as a continuation of our efforts to be more responsive to the needs of our business community. We're also continuing to look at changes for the cut-fill regulations. We've had 1 work study session with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we're having a follow-up session next Thursday evening. Some of the things that we're looking at there are a consolidation of regulations, streamlining some of the processes, possibly taking a look at some exemptions for some commercial development, retaining wall heights, and driveway slopes. With regard to some of the environmental programs that we've got going on, Raymond Reese, our environmental planner, has been a very busy man this first quarter of the year. We had 3 recycling events, all of which were very successful. We started with a household hazardous waste event at the end of February. We had an electronics recycling event in March, and we had a paper shredding event in April. We're continuing to work through issues with regard to trash hauling and recycling, and next Tuesday night you have a work study where Raymond will present you with his latest research and recommendations regarding that topic. I would like to report that with regard to our Building Safety Division, they tell me that all of the improvements to the Bashes Shopping Center are substantially complete. There are some final remodeling, interior remodeling things going on at the Ace Hardware store. The Chief Building Official is also serving as project manager for the fire station, the proposed fire station, and in that capacity has been involved in an open house for some homeowners associations, and has the site blue staked and done some survey work. With regard to building inspections themselves, in January we had 223 stops, and when I say a stop, that could be more than 1 inspection. Usually one stop can be 2 or 3 inspections. We had, in February, we had 211, in March 315, so we went up there, and in April 228. With regard to code enforcement is a lot of their work is continuing to be or involve green pools that the waters become stagnant. Many of those we find due to foreclosure of the homes. We keep getting a lot of those reported to us. We did 21 green pool investigations in the first quarter, and so in April of just this last month, we had 14. So that activity, I think, is going to continue to occupy a lot of their time. The CAD GIS section has been very busy. We've implemented a new customer response system there using the town's e-fountain system to track workload and projects. They've been involved in lots of drawings for various projects, including alley paving plans, parking lots for botanical gardens, fire station sites, and an inventory of sculptures around town. And finally, miscellaneous kinds of things. We did complete the Smart Growth Scorecard, which is a State Department of Commerce project. Having completed that, that will allow us extra credit on any grant applications that we file for with the State of Arizona. We also completed this year's edition of the Land Use Analysis and Statistical Report. We did that with the assistance of volunteers and saved the town $5,000. And finally, with regard to our mediation services, Solvit. Fountain Hills has become the most active jurisdiction using that service. In the month of March, we had 24 active cases. The City of Chandler had 23, Mesa only had 18. So we're getting our money's worth with regard to using Solvit and the mediation services. So that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilmember Hanson.
Thank you. Richard, do you have the breakdown on those mediation cases? I mean, is there something that's a little more common than others?
I don't, however, I do know from looking at mediation in general that barking dogs is usually a number one with a bullet. Very popular topic.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Richard, you mentioned the A-frame signs, which are usually advertisements for the businesses that are running a special or something. They're not really directional signs. And you said that you were, planning and zoning was looking at changing the 20-foot distance. Did you have a maximum?
The way we're changing that, and Mayor Schlum and Vice Mayor Archambault, the way we're changing that is just to remove that 20-foot restriction, so all the other restrictions remain in place, which means that the A-frame sign is still going to have to be on the site that the business is located. Now, if that means that it's a strip shopping center, that can be anywhere within the limits of that strip shopping center.
I got you. Okay.
So there's the flexibility.
That answered my
provided.
question. Thank you.
You have a ability to answer the hair hut solution?
Mayor Schlum, this should resolve that issue, yes.
Good. And as far as the A-frames, just see them creeping up here and there, and I know obviously some of them are not where they're really allowed. And I don't want business owners to start spending money on a lot of A-frames where they suspect they'll get a lot of visibility, particularly in medians. I kind of doubt that probably there are any medians that really would allow an A-frame sign in our community. Even if we chose to, they're likely in view corridors or areas that we likely couldn't authorize their use anyway. So are we having meetings with business owners, new or existing, on a regular basis to educate them before they do spend money on signage, be it A-frames or otherwise?
Mayor Schlum, we did have a series of meetings earlier in the year, and we invited a lot of businesses to come down and meet with us and provide an opportunity for the staff to provide them with education on the A-frame regulations. And we do have some flyers. We continue to try and get those out into the community so we can continue to educate the business owners on the proper use of A-frame signage.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Turner? Well, thank you for reporting from you and all your teams.
Thank you.
All right, next item, consideration of appointing a new town council member to fill the vacancy and the possible administration of the oath of office by Municipal Judge Ted Armbruster. I first want to, who is still here? Good. I wanted to comment just on where we've been and how we've got to where we are tonight. Of course, our dear friend, former council member Keith McMahon, passed away on St. Patrick's Day of this year. Tragic loss for us, and there's no replacing Keith McMahon for sure. And we've had great opportunity to mourn with one another and celebrate his life, and now we need to fill the seat and his remaining term. So we've advertised. The Times has been great about running information about the process, and we took applications, really a letter of interest, resume, and financial disclosure statement through a couple of weeks ago, and we ended up with 8 applicants. So terrific response for the one important position we have here. We had public forum, which was well watched, I know, on streaming video and audio, and I thought our town manager did a great job moderating that, all with questions from the public, and we've had a lot of public comment received from that meeting, as well as emails and phone calls and just general discussion in grocery stores with people sharing their opinions on friends that might be running or acquaintances, or their opinion on the applicants that they may not have known until hearing about them in the public forum. And then we went about this process because we don't have an opportunity to do an election.
the town code says the council shall appoint. And we tried to figure out the best opportunity to get public involved, public dialogue going, and I think it's gone quite well. Now we are at a point where now the council has had interviews with the candidates this week, and we are at the point to make a appointment, which is what we're responsible to do. I wanted to see first, before I make a motion, that we have any public comment.
No, Mayor,
Tonight.
I do not.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to move to fill the seat left open by the passing of our dear friend, Councilmember Keith McMahon, for the remainder of that term. I'd move to appoint Dennis Brown. Do I have a second? Second. Any discussion? Councilmember Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just feel like I need to make a comment that I do have reservations about appointing for a full 3-year term, and I hope we can proceed really quickly on amending our code so we can change the wording so it's appointment until the next regularly scheduled election.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any others?
Just one, Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Dickey.
It was a pleasure to meet everybody and to talk to all of them and appreciate everybody's interest in our community. It was a very good process and I appreciated it.
Thank you. I meant to mention that. I had it right here. And the applicants that many of us in the community met for the first time through this process are just a testament to the people in our community that you don't even know, maybe your next door neighbors. And I encourage everyone, obviously one position, 8 applicants, to please continue to be involved in our community in the ways that you're doing today and in the future. Obviously there's council positions opening up through the regular election process very soon. So please stay engaged and get plugged into our community even more, and we appreciate your desire to join us up here on the council. Some very highly qualified applicants, so it was a tough decision. All right, we've got a motion and a second. We've had discussion. Any additional comments? Yeah, roll call, please.
Councilmember Dickey?
Aye.
Councilmember Cantino?
Nay.
Councilmember Hanson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Shambo?
Aye.
Mayor Schlum?
Aye.
Councilmember Leger?
Aye.
Mayor 5-1.
All right, thank you very much. We have spent a lot of energy on this because it is very important, and we did the best we could, and it was difficult because of the applicants that to make one choice, and that's all we could do. So congratulations, Mr. Brown. Thank you for applying as well, and if you are available, and Judge Armbruster, you agree, come be sworn in up here in front of the...
Mayor?
Yes.
I have to apologize. I left the form upstairs because
Okay.
it's just a blank form. So if you will excuse me, I will run upstairs quickly and get that.
Do we have other items we can go through?
We could do the other item.
We could do the update from our town manager discussion and
We could adjourn.
update. We can adjourn. But let me first just share a little bit about council member appointed, a council member here before we pass here. Why don't you come up here, Dennis, if you don't mind, and up here to the front, and Judy, if you don't mind coming up too, if you're not too shy. I'll introduce you to the public while Channel 11 is still running here. Not sure if we can get zoomed in over there on Dennis.
Oh, yeah, that camera right over there.
All right, this is Dennis Brown, if you don't know Dennis, and his wife Judy. Residents of Fountain Hills since 1996. Dennis has been serving on our Planning and Zoning Commission since 2002, and he's currently the chairman of our Planning and Zoning Commission. He's served and volunteered on many, many subcommittees across our town and our community, not just with the municipality, but in various other functions for the past 8 years, and he's been doing so to not just benefit our community, but to also learn the ways of our town and the workings of our community. So Dennis will hit the ground running for sure. He has a real job as well as volunteering. He's and Judy run Echelon Fine Home Builders, where they are commercial and residential construction experts. Dennis or Judy, anything you wish to add there?
I think you said it pretty well.
Yeah.
Mayor.
Well, I wanted to introduce you and Judy to the public, and the process is now, we'll get you sworn in, then there's like a waiting period of some sort of 24 hours, and then will be officially a council member, and we want to get you on board, and that's why I'd like to have you do the oath tonight so that we can have you participate in the budget discussions that we're now diving into significantly, and we'll need all the minds on that as we can to come out with the best budget. So, thanks again. Judge Armbruster, yes. Judge Armbruster's coming forward, and I know Bev will be right down, but we will move on with our agenda and get us adjourned, and we'll do our oath after we've adjourned. Was there anything, Town Manager, for council discussion or direction apart from, well, that may not be relevant.
I have nothing at this time.
All right, other than to talk up the census.
And Mr. Mayor, we'll bring back examples of other cities and towns' options on appointment processes for your consideration very soon.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'd like that to be on our next agenda to give future councils as much of any of the options that might prove best, given whatever circumstances arise. Of course, you don't expect the death to arise. So, but should another instance arise where we need to do an appointment, that would be great to have options, all the options available to future councils. Councilmember Dickey?
Just if it's still relevant, maybe having the league come and give us the talk about the development fees and the budget.
Good. Thank you for reminding us of that. I think that is it. Look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you.
We did.
Except for that.
Well,
Oh,
these are all gone. Don't need that no more.
The rest of us wanted to hear him get sworn in.
No, that was the practice. That was the practice right there. Whispering.
Public
We would like to go. This is more.
All right. Standing out of the picture. This is wonderful. No, we adjourned our meeting. Oh, yeah.
Repeat after me, please. I, and state your name,
And I, Dennis Brown,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
and defend them against all enemies,
and defend them against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge these duties
that I will faithfully and impartially discharge these duties
of the office of Town Council Member
of office of the Town Council Member
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God. Thank you.
There's the real council member right there.
Get that home.